Hello, and welcome to the Armin Show podcast. Science, people, creativity, growing as individuals, learning more, connecting with individuals all around the planet in different categories that make sense to improving in our well being and understanding authors, scientists. Subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, wherever it might be. The show continues to blossom. We will be including live streams in the near future. Panels are good. Support the show. On this one here, we have a guest. We have a person who does writing. They write a newsletter. They're part of a remote team building the world's best online writing school. They run creative experiments. Long live creativity. That's one of the three key items of this show. And experimenting means you have some framework to go at something. My guest today is Charlotte Grysolle. Charlotte, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thank you, Armin. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad to have you on. Writing is super duper, and creativity is very important. Before we get into that, where are you currently? Where have you been? Tell us about some locations in your existence, your path as far as places.
Okay. I'll keep it quite short and stick to the locations. Um,
Cool.
so currently in Belgium, spending some time at my parents' place. This is where I was born and raised. But I've actually spent the last 10 years living and working abroad for my past career in advertising. Spent a few years in New York, then a few years in Singapore, and then most recently in London. And that's where I am right now, or where I am still living currently, but actually planning to move to Lisbon in a few months. So, I guess, as you can tell, I like to move around a lot. I like to live abroad, and I'm kind of planning on doing that for a long time. But so right now I'm in Belgium, which is really nice. Just spend good quality time with friends and family.
That's cool. Now, the first thing that comes to mind that is that when you're at different locations, and each one makes me think of something different. New York is highly active. Singapore, concrete jungle, but has developed very well.
Mhm.
How would you say you are different after having gone to various locations? Let's say you didn't go to some of these locations and stay there for a while. Can you see some huge differences that would have taken place?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I actually think about this quite a lot because I feel like I've changed a lot as a person over the last few years. And I think a big part of that has to do with the fact that I've been living abroad. I think I think it's quite hard to change drastically as a person if you stay in your hometown. Um, and that might not be the case for everyone, but I think it would have been for me. So I feel like having had those 10 years abroad and kind of always arriving in new places where no one really knows you and you have to kind of start from scratch, that also allows you to change in ways that you wouldn't have if you stayed very close to your friends and family. So I've changed a lot over the last few years, definitely. And what's been interesting about like the different places that I lived in is that obviously I was always like in a different age range. So yeah, New York was like very fast paced, very, high kind of high intensity living, which was great. And I was in my early 20s. So that's what I absolutely loved. Like, I don't think I could live there now as like an early 30-year-old, but in my early 20s, that was great. And then Singapore really fit my age bracket of the time as well, which was like late 20s, early 30s, which was a lot about like working hard and yeah, like really focusing on work, but still wanting to travel a lot and still wanting to party a lot as well. And now I'm in my early 30s and kind of my priorities are shifting again. Now I want to like take it easier and definitely less focus on partying, but still a lot of focus on working and kind of self-development and that kind of stuff. And that's why Lisbon is going to be a great place for me. So I feel like with every place I'm kind of evolving and I'm kind of always looking for the place that fits what I'm looking for in the moment. And so far that's been going pretty well.
I like that you mentioned the time periods because places are associated with that time. It's not the same as if it was in a different part of our existence.
No.
It'd be a completely different experience. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely. Because after Singapore, I moved to London for only 18 months, and I actually thought I was going to absolutely love it because I loved New York so much, and it's kind of comparable vibes. But I very quickly realized that I'm not in that same kind of mindset anymore. So a place like London doesn't really fit me anymore. So that's why I'm kind of moving on to the next place. Um, it's a journey and a search.
Two things here. One, uh, Lisbon, one thing, but before that, how much of it is that when you go to a new place after the second or third or fourth or fifth place, are you really starting from scratch, or does it feel like you now have a larger network? Does the starting from scratch still continue each time?
Yeah, I guess I've never even really had to start from absolute scratch. There's always a few people that you know through friends or through like Belgium is quite a small place. So I feel like there's always one random Belgian that you meet and they'll introduce you to 10 other Belgians and then that Belgian is a cousin of the cousin that you had. Like it's so interconnected. So I feel like in every place I've always had that kind of Belgian group to rely on and then you kind of span out. But still, you still have to meet new friends and pick up new hobbies and kind of find your way again in every new place. So every time it is like building your life again, which is not always easy, but I've always that has always like given me a lot of energy and happiness. I guess that's why I've done it so many times and why I'm doing it again. Even though I said I wouldn't, but I'm doing it again.
She's doing it again. Okay,
She's doing
that's
it
cool.
again. Stop her.
Stop! Somebody stop the transportation. Someone limit it.
Yeah.
That's true. Lisbon. When I think of two things, one, Ricardo Lopez, he has the show The Dissenter. He's in, I think near Portugal or near Lisbon, somewhere there. But when you think of Lisbon and or Spain, those two I kind of put together. It has a slower lifestyle. What about the
Mm.
area drew you to it? Is there any specific details that you picked that versus like Morocco?
Oh, interesting. Well, I think Lisbon specifically because it is becoming a bit of a kind of remote worker hub in Europe.
Hmm.
So while I definitely want to be in a place that's a bit like slower lifestyle, more outdoor lifestyle, I still want to be somewhere where it's quite buzzy and there's a lot of young people and there's a bit of that expat vibe as well because I just know that that's what I really love and what I really feel good in. So it's the combination of those things that really make Lisbon a really good choice. And out of I guess all the like cities, bigger cities in Europe, there are not that many choices. If you're then also looking for good weather, for example, which is what I'm looking for, then you kind of narrow down the search quite quickly. Um, so yeah,
Good weather's a big deal. It affects you
it
daily.
is
It affects you like
exactly.
it can knock out 4 months of a year in some locations or other locations.
Mm.
Interesting. It's nice to have that worldly sense. I think it's always helpful. If you told someone, would you rather have some sort of bigger picture sense and have gone to different places or have not been in many different places? There's very few people on the planet that would defend having stuck with one location harshly or like strongly because it doesn't have the most compelling message behind it. Which you can
Mm.
build more connections maybe in an area, but we have some exploratory nature.
Yeah, definitely. Although I guess there's pros and cons to both, right? Whenever I come back home, I am reminded of kind of the beauty of that community feeling of going to the city center and running into people I haven't seen for 5 years from or people from high school or it's there is kind of also a beauty to having that local community which I don't necessarily have as strongly anymore.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it's just two very different lifestyles. Can't have it both.
Cannot have it both.
Nope.
Cannot choose all the parts. Now, and I'm in Los Angeles. I always mention that, but long live that region. Now, you create a variety of items. I create a long live creative individuals. Being creative is because some people I've talked to many people in public. I've socialized a lot, like quite a lot over many years, and a lot of people will say I'm not creative. They'll just say it directly. They say I'm not a creative. They may be creative in some realms that are not more typically described as creative, but in their head, they're like, I'm not creative. So in the category of that, when did that start? And is writing the biggest category that you have connected with? Where has it gone from your expression?
Yeah, it's funny what you say about people saying I'm not creative, because that's definitely a line that I used to hide behind for a very, very long time as well. And I would literally say those words. I am not creative. I used to
You
work
would say that.
oh yeah, I used to work in an advertising agency, and I was the part of the account management team, so always working with the creative teams and managing the clients. And whenever something would come up, I would literally say, "Well, I'm not a creative person, so I can't I can't help you with this. I'll have to ask the creative team, or then the people who are paid to be creative." So I would hide for a long time about the kind of the idea that I'm not a creative person, and generally believed that for a long time as well. And that has only really changed once I started writing online. And to your question, yes, writing is my biggest thing. Like I am doing a lot of these like smaller creative experiments where I'm trying out video and where I'm trying out, using online tools and that kind of stuff. But it all revolves around writing. And I think you mentioned in intro as well, I am now also working for an online writing school, an online course. So both in kind of my personal life and my professional life, I am now very, very focused on writing and writing online specifically.
When you think of writing, does it put our mind together? How are you before having written your thoughts or getting them out there? How are you afterwards? What kind of value can it bring to you as a person just from doing the process?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I'd say for me, there are like a few reasons why I write and why I think writing is can be valuable for anyone. Not even You don't need to want to be a professional writer. You don't need to want to be paid for your writing or want to build an online audience. Like just the skill of writing, I think is incredibly valuable for anyone for a few reasons. The first one is just the emotional benefits of taking the time to really write down your thoughts on paper. I think very few people actually do that and actually, yeah, really, really take the time to think about how do I feel about this? What's my opinion on this? Um, how would I tackle this? Really taking the time to write those things down has really incredible like emotional benefits. You start to understand yourself on a much deeper level. So that's emotionally. But then there's also, to me, like mental benefits. Writing, as you know, can be incredibly frustrating and can be incredibly difficult. Um, you don't write?
No, I do.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I was saying like the frustration of it, like, oh, something's not working out exactly.
Yep, exactly. So writing can be incredibly frustrating, and it takes a lot of persistence and concentration and effort to keep going. So if you do this day after day, week after week, you really kind of train those mental abilities that I've noticed have had spillover effects in my work life as well. I've become a lot better at sticking with frustrating tasks or at focusing on something for a long period of time, just because I've been training that ability through my writing. And then the last one is obviously like creative benefits, right? I feel like once you start writing online, you really start looking at the world through that lens of how can I write about this? What is interesting about this? What is special about this? You become a lot more observant. And obviously, I also started taking a lot of notes and built this whole note-taking system. And so by doing that, you just become a lot more intentional and aware about your experiences and about what you're reading, what you're listening to. So all of that is has had really, really amazing benefits for me creatively as well. Um, so yeah, I think everybody should try writing, online writing.
I have a story here that made me think of. But so this was, let's say, a year or two ago. The stories are good. I don't include enough stories. I'm at a location. I'm talking with somebody. We're recording. Okay, I talk. After a talk, I'm leaving. This is in person. I have my briefcase or such with my laptop. The story will connect already. I just wanted to include. And then
Okay, I'm waiting.
it's like out of nowhere. So we went outside, and then I was like, oh, let's take a picture inside before we leave their location in like a building. And so I left my stuff outside, came inside. We recorded a clip about the content, and then this was like a minute. Came outside, boom, my stuff is gone. So my laptop's gone. Now somebody had taken it. Great, but the point of this is that the next like month or so without my laptop, I still have my phone, but I wasn't doing my note taking as normal that I write daily. And it was like I was a blur, well, not a blur, but I wasn't able to get things going for like a month and a half because this kind of note taking does not speak to me. Typing it
Yeah.
out does, because I can do it faster and a lot goes on. And I won't forget that because I never realized the value of all my daily note taking and writing and messages to myself until it was gone. And suddenly I was like 1/3 as effective.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. Definitely.
that's just the case.
I think I've become a bit of an obsessive note taker, so I'm not sure if it really works for everyone, and I'm also not always sure if it's as efficient for me. I've scaled it down quite a bit now, actually, to make it a bit more efficient. But I really believe in writing down as many of your thoughts as possible, even if you don't know how you're going to use them. Because I think that's where a lot of people maybe go wrong with note taking. They kind of overthink the structure and the organization and what's the point and how am I going to use this? And then you get lost in the mess and you spend more time organizing notes than actually using them. Whereas where I've been able to evolve after 2 years is having some kind of very loose system where I can just dump all of my thoughts, all of my observations, and I have a basic organization, of course, and some taggings, but it's very minimal. And I've just noticed how when I'm writing now, I can very easily retrieve things and very easily retrieve ideas and resources that I can then use in my writing. So I've really started seeing the power of note taking and writing down my thoughts and being able to then use those in my writing later on.
That's a good point. That it's not good to consolidate while you are in the expansion process. You're like consolidating while you're supposed to be expanding. It's like countering your own force. You have to put out all your material and then you can come back through it. And then
Yeah.
what would be, how would you describe your system? So like some things about my journal writing is not so useful because I always have the idea that I'll go back to 6 months ago, a year and a half ago and check it. But most of the time it just stays there. And then my golden thoughts, they're not linked back. Do you have any ways to link things back in some form? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess there's like two parts to my system. One is my journal. So I use an app called Day One. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's a journaling app. It's a digital system, and I have that on my computer and my phone. And that's where almost daily, or at least every 2 days, I'll just write down thoughts and observations about my day and about what I've been up to. And I actually go through those journals at the end of every month. And I know that sounds time consuming, but it's actually not really. By now, it takes me maybe 20 minutes to half an hour at the end of the month to kind of go through all my different entries and just take out high level observations and thoughts. And I do that for every month. And then at the end of the year, that's what I use for kind of my annual review and thinking ahead and planning ahead for the next year. And I've been doing that for 2 years now, and it's just been so incredibly powerful and helpful. Not only to remember what I've done, because it's insane how quickly I forget, but also to kind of see patterns and see how I've grown, how I've changed, what I should be focusing on the next year. So that has been super, super helpful. So that's my kind of the journaling element of it. But then I also have the more, um, how should I even call that? It's more my note-taking system around everything I'm reading I'm reading about. So that's, whenever it's a whole setup between my Kindle, whenever I highlight, it all gets saved into a note-taking app. So I can then use that in my writing. So that's less my own personal thoughts and ruminations from my journal, but more the note-taking system around um, everything I'm reading and learning about. So those are two quite different systems that I use.
I like those quite a bit. The idea of reviewing, I could even apply that at the end of the month because then you have your, let's say, 30 days of notes. Okay, what did I write a lot about repeatedly? What were the little tidbits that I probably forgot about, but there were some golden nuggets? I can save that into some section for use. Was there anything that like I kept telling myself I need to do it? Okay, clearly I told myself 9 times this month, so maybe
Yeah,
that would be valuable. A
no,
review.
exactly. And I keep it very simple. It's literally a few bullet points for what went well, and then a few bullet points for what didn't go so well. And I do that for every month. And like I said, it takes me 30 minutes to put together, and at the end of the year, I go through it, and it's quite remarkable, kind of the learnings you can get from that. Because ultimately, a year is quite long, even though it flies by. But there's so much you can do and so much you can learn in one year, and if you don't keep track of that, and if you don't have some kind of system to review, I think you lose out on a lot of learnings.
It'll just float away. That's a
Yeah.
valid point. Actually, on that point of the year, maybe think of something. Is there a specific year that comes to mind? There might be one or might not. That wow, that year was highly impactful in existence. Is there one that comes to mind where you're like, that year really was a package deal for my being?
I mean, the first year that comes to mind is 2021 COVID, as for so many people. But that was for me a kind of a turning point in the sense that I started writing online and sharing online. And that has changed the trajectory of my life from then until now, in terms of changing industry, starting a completely new job, and really starting to build this kind of online presence, which has just been so amazing in so many different ways, just for me emotionally, but also, like I said, professionally, um, as well as meeting people. So many interesting people I've met online. If you had told me this a few years ago, that I would be meeting up with people that I've met on Twitter, I would absolutely roll my eyes at you and yeah, exactly. And think that's super lame and super weird. Whereas now I think it's the most amazing thing. Like when I was in Lisbon, I was there for a month, and I've met up with two people that I met through Twitter, and it was so nice. It was so it felt like these were people I had known for the longest time, just because we had already been talking so much online about, the stuff we're interested in and the stuff we're reading and kind of following each other's work. And when I then met with them in person, it just felt like absolutely normal. And so that all started with writing online. None of that would have happened if I hadn't started a blog and started a newsletter and joined an online writing course. So yeah, that kind of that decision to do that changed everything.
That's a big one when you find the people that really mesh with you,
Yeah,
especially when there might be just a few. You mesh with them, and then you're like, this one individual like that can make up for 1,000 other individuals that is not at the same wavelength that you're at. Pretty
absolutely.
impactful. That's a cool one. Now, the compounding effect. Does writing compound? If you write, uh, let's just say your thoughts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days in a row, does it start to get good after that? The eighth, ninth, 10th day, can someone benefit from that? Is there something that is canceled when you take a 4 day break and a 10-day break and a 2 month break?
If you had asked me that question last year, I would have probably said yes. I would have said, don't break the streak, keep writing, keep going, push yourself. It's all about consistency, blah, 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 all those things you see on Twitter and all those, you know, but if you ask me that
Threads.
now, exactly. I've actually changed my mind on that quite a bit just because I've seen how it has worked for me personally and how I've had major, I don't even necessarily want to call it an up and a down because it hasn't, down sounds so negative, but I guess major like rhythms in terms of creativity and motivation and energy to write. So I have had weeks where I just didn't write as much just because I didn't have the mental energy for it. And I used to beat myself up for that and try to push through it. But now I just let it happen. And I try to really kind of surrender to that feeling of low energy and use it as a moment to just relax a bit, less reading, less podcasting. Usually that happens for me, that moment of less of low energy when I've been going too hard. I've been reading too much, listening to too many podcasts, getting way too much input and way too much. I'm just overstimulated. And that then really impacts my writing as well. And I've noticed that for me, then just taking a step back for a few days and then coming back to it when I kind of intuitively feel that I'm feeling motivated again works so much better. And I've had times when, I'd be struggling on an essay or struggling on a newsletter and it's not working, it's not flowing. And I just step away from it for a few days. And when I come back to it, it's like it clicks and you just work on it and it works. So I don't believe anymore in like consistency at all costs. I think, we're energetic beings and there's a whole neurochemistry behind this as well. So there's more to it than just pushing yourself. There's times when you also actually have to listen to your body and listen to your energy levels and go with that. And I found that that works a lot better for me.
That's a cool one there. When there's those good high energy moments, we can do so much, and it's worth like 4 or 5 times the average moment. And then those other times where it's you're not feeling it, you can't counter it. I've never been able to counter those moments by like just push against it. You're just gonna. It's a wall that cannot be
It really
conquered. It's
is.
just
It really, really is. And to me, the most fascinating thing has been learning about the neurochemistry behind that. So learning about the whole dopamine system. When I actually had quite a major writing rut in March, I didn't get it. I couldn't
what
understand. I
happened
was
in
like,
March. What happened?
I honestly, well, no, I was going to say I have no idea, but I actually do have an idea. It's because I pushed myself way too hard in February. And it was just constant wanting to write. Every free moment, I felt like I had to fill it up with something productively. Even going out for a walk had to be combined with listening to a podcast, taking notes. Like it's too much. It was too much. So, and I really felt the effects in March. And that's when I started reading about the whole dopamine system and how you can deplete your dopamine in your system and that has a direct effect on how motivated you feel and how willing you feel to push through effort and how willing you are to reach your goals. So what I really realized then, and I just find that super fascinating, is that you know being in that moment of low motivation is not a weakness of mine. It doesn't mean that I should just push myself harder. All it means is that I've depleted my dopamine system and there are certain things I need to do to fill it back up. And I can do that and then get back to writing, or I can resist it and make it last for a lot longer. So I've really been reading a lot about those systems and what you can do to then work with your body instead of trying to work against it. And I've been doing that now, yeah, March, April, May, and it goes really well. I feel like I'm in just a lot more like stable creative energy.
You feel like you're pushing less against your internal
Yes,
biochemistry. You're more flowing with it. Yeah,
absolutely.
that's a key
Yeah.
thing. We don't want to deplete and then because then it won't be worth it. The idea that okay, oh I pushed a little bit harder, okay, I got 3 more percent, and then now I'm out for the week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or I even forgot about the thing. Some people maybe they moved to a different venture and that thing ended because too far
Exactly.
off.
Exactly. And I think looking back now, I see that's what I used to do before starting to write online. I always felt like I was someone who would, start a lot of new things, but kind of lose interest quite quickly and give up quite quickly. And I'm seeing now what I was doing. I was doing the same thing, but I didn't have the background yet around dopamine systems and the whole neurochemistry about behind motivation. So I didn't really realize what to do about it and how I could recharge myself to go back to the project with kind of renewed energy and motivation. So it's really fascinating stuff that once you start understanding those systems a little bit better, how you can really use them and leverage them in in your life.
Well, here's one question that comes to mind. If one has all the creativity and expression now as you do, but you were only creating in the last couple of years, if I talk to 10 years ago version of you, are the thoughts not there? Is there a feeling like I'm supposed to be expressing? What does that ten years ago version of you think about the space? Or did you just blossom this end from nowhere?
What do you mean exactly? What would 10
Like,
year 10 year ago Charlotte think of?
like, yeah, 10 years ago, Charlotte, what would she say if I said, hey, are you um, do you have creative thoughts you want to put out? What are your thoughts? Did she have no thoughts and not
Oh, she
express
had
them?
thoughts.
She had.
Oh, she had
Wh-
many thoughts.
what happened with her thoughts? Was it like she had them and then, okay, I'll just let them go? Or what was the way that would be different from today?
Um, that's a good question.
I only do good. We only do good questions on this program.
Of course, of course.
That's the rules. Also, Charlotte is thoughtful. I want to say award winning. Thought is good.
It is good. And there were many thoughts, but I think there was not a lot of awareness of them, or any awareness of them, actually. Um, and that only really started once I started journaling and and taking the time to really write them down. Um, there was a lot of, I mean, I guess as so many like early 20-year-olds have, there was a lot of kind of insecurity and anxiousness around things. Looking back at it now, we're all so silly, but that's how it was. And yeah,
We are silly early on.
sorry.
We are quite silly early on.
We are, and just a bit. I do remember being quite lost in terms of what's my what's my thing going to be. Um, what am I good at? What do I enjoy doing? I remember feeling very self-conscious about the fact that I didn't really have like deep interests or hobbies or talents. I always felt like other people had that. Other people had this thing that they could talk about passionately or, very confidently, or people who had this hobby that they're super into, or this skill that they're just really naturally good at. And I always felt like I didn't have that. And I remember always being very insecure about that. Um, and all of that only really changed once I started again writing online. So that clearly changed a lot for me.
Does it say something that if you were insecure about that, you actually saw in yourself that quality was there and you wanted to go in that direction? Because if I'm sure some people were not insecure about that category. They were insecure about something else. And that was the thing that mattered to them that later on they would want to build up. So maybe that was like inklings underneath of, wait a minute, there's something there that I would like to have that. I have that already, but I can't, like, I haven't linked to it directly in my mind.
Yeah, no, there definitely was because I remember even when I was um, 18, I did this like 6 months traveling, and I had started a travel blog then. And I wish I had kept up with it because that would have been like 15 years ago. It would have been huge by now. I would have been a
Like my
world
blog
famous.
15 years ago. We both had a blog 15
Exactly.
years ago.
That was like the prime time of blogging. If I had only kept up with it, but I didn't. Um, but it was
Wait,
clear that I.
I have a
Hmm?
great question related to that. I also left
Yes.
my item, but later on I looked back that if I didn't have something like that, that I then let go at some point, the second time around, I might let this thing go, whatever it might be. You know what I'm saying? Now suddenly like, oh, wait a minute, I have a thing that has a value that builds. Is that something that maybe now you see that if you have something now, you
Maybe.
might hold?
Maybe. It's impossible to know, right? Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't regret it too much. But it's just funny to think about. But it also just shows that kind of the writing was already there for me. But there was a lot of embarrassment around it. I felt like, writing online is you have to be quite a bit like arrogant and a bit self-indulgent to do that. Like why would anybody be really interested in your ideas? So for the longest time, I felt like that's not just something that someone like me would do. So that's why I guess it took such a long time between my 18-year-old travel blog and then my 32-year-old um, newsletter and yeah, newsletter Charlotte.
Speaking of your newsletter, Stretch newsletter, can you tell us about it? What do you like to put out on there? And what's the name? Stretch. What does that represent?
Stretch. It's so funny. I literally came up with that name so quickly because I was like, I need to start. I'm not going to overthink the name. It doesn't matter. I can always change it later. I am just going to start, and that's what I did. And now the name has kind of grown on me. So that's good. I've been writing that now for 15 months. So started in January of last year, and I absolutely love it. Like my newsletter is my favorite thing to do in the whole
But do you
wide.
love it, Charlotte? Do you love it though?
I love it.
Yeah.
I do. It's like a newsletter is it's such a it's such a an amazing thing to write because it's really like your own little piece of the internet where you can just share your ideas in a very low friction way. I also like to write articles and put them on my blog, but I always feel like those are a heavy lift because it's like an article and you need to like make sure it's there's more elements to it, whereas a newsletter feels a little bit more casual. So I've really been loving using my newsletter to, yeah, just share a bunch of ideas, share resources, share some personal updates, share observations, connect with people who are reading my stuff. So a newsletter has been really great for that. And it's kind of been evolving over the last 15 months, but I feel like now I'm really honing down on what my topics are that I really like to write about. And it is all about a little bit like what I was just talking about, the whole neurochemistry topic. That's kind of the areas that I really love to write about. It's the neuroscience and the psychology behind motivation and focus and resilience and creativity, and really share ideas and resources that people can use to try out try out certain techniques and certain tools to get to know their own minds and bodies better. So that's what I've really been focusing on and what I've been enjoying writing about.
Question here from a personal standpoint. Even when I had my blog a long time ago, I was thinking about starting a newsletter. It was about 4 years that I had that blog. I never did. And then recently I have not. But if someone wanted to start a newsletter from scratch today, other than having like a PO box or some physical address or a virtual address, because you need that for a newsletter, what other frictional points might there be to having one started like from tomorrow and just start getting people's emails?
Well, I think for a lot of people, it is things like what is the name going to be of my newsletter? How often am I going to send it? What am I going to talk about? Those three things I have noticed is what people get hung up about and think, don't I need to have that perfectly figured out before I can start sending emails? And what I would say to that is, you don't, because if you wait to have that figured out, you are going to lose time and you might never start then. And because that's exactly how I've started. I picked a name in 5 minutes. I randomly decided to start sending it out every 2 weeks because I also wasn't sure if weekly would work for me. So I wanted to kind of lower the barrier for myself and just instead of deciding 1 week every week, I said I'm just going to do it every 2 weeks. And I'm just going to start writing. I'm not 100% sure yet exactly what my topics are going to be, but I'm just going to start and refine as I go. And it's now been 15 months. And as I just mentioned, I'm only now starting to feel like I'm kind of finding my
Groove.
topics, my
Oh,
groove, exactly.
yeah.
And but finding my groove through finding my topics. So that took me 15 months. Had I waited to start my newsletter before I would figure that out, I don't. It's not possible. You have to go through the motions and go through the process and go through that trial and error to really be able to figure that out. Um, so yeah, that's what I always try to recommend to people whenever, and obviously we as part of my job at Rite of Passage, the online writing course, we help people get set up with their newsletter, and we encourage people to get started, and that's just what I've noticed where most people kind of get stuck. Those first few elements of name, logo, topics, and we always try to get it in people's minds that you won't know until you start. And it is going to feel uncomfortable at first. And it is going to take some searching. And no, you won't have a lot of readers yet in the beginning. And you might lose a few readers if you change topics too often. But that's all going to be part of the process to, yeah, to kind of get closer to your groove.
What's one, just a specific one, what's one service you might recommend for putting out a newsletter? Is there a name that comes to mind or like a basic way? Is there, what's one?
So I've personally been using Beehive, which is it just makes it incredibly easy to start. You don't even need a PO box. I
Oh,
think that's
because for
that's
me, the logistical hangups are more the three things you mentioned, I'm like good to go.
well, then you are good to go, Armin, because you don't have any excuse then. With Beehive, it takes you a few minutes to set up an account, and you're good to go. And then there's also Substack, of course, which is also very low friction to get started. So,
That's true.
yeah.
That's a good point. I've made a Substack. That's cool. I don't think of it as a newsletter. I think of it as Substack for some reason, but that's funny. It is a newsletter.
It is a
That's a valid
newsletter.
point. For me, I've noticed a lot of times the little, very small logistical things are the issue. Not the. There's usually these items that hold it back 94, 98% of people, and then there's
Yeah.
like you were supposed to open this URL. This stopped me, but these things no. So that's good. We should all understand our points of what is our thing, and then speak that out into the world until we can figure out that part. Or speak about it, write about it. I've talked about that. Like speak or write to the way you want to go until somebody will show up or some book or something
Yeah.
or some website, and then
Something
you're
is
like,
going to
oh,
click. Something is going to click, but it takes time.
right. How can a person in 2023 maintain their focus?
Oof, it's a big question.
Yeah.
That
out
is a
of
big question.
nowhere,
Out of nowhere. Um,
and also to maintain their attention span.
oh, hello. Um, well, what I would say is as always, and as I guess already mentioned the word a few times, it's about awareness about your own triggers and pitfalls. Where, when is it difficult for you to focus? When is it easier for you to focus? What breaks your focus? Are there certain techniques that you've tried where you've noticed that help with focus and really being very aware and almost like experimenting with those things and taking notes, making observations, because those are the kind of things that I also write down in my journal. When I've had a really good work day, why was that? What did I do differently? When I had a really unfocused and unmotivated work day, why was that? Did I exercise in the morning or in the evening? Did I have a big lunch or a very light lunch? Did I, like all those little elements about my day? I try to make some notes about that and then look for some patterns. And after having done that now for about like a year and a half, I'm very aware of what works well for me and what doesn't work. And I try as much as I can to kind of craft my days around that now. And it's things like, nutrition and exercise, obviously, but also how I structure my day, what kind of tasks are good for me in the morning, what kind of tasks are good for me in the afternoon. There's a really big difference for me. And if you're not aware of those things, or if you never pay attention to those things, then you're kind of going in blind. And then it's a lot harder to focus and it's a lot harder to get your work done. At least that's what I've noticed for myself.
That makes sense. Yeah, we do have those key points, and anytime I have willingly given up one of those important parts of my day where the focus was going great, and then I included someone that I didn't need to at that time, or I switched the plan when I didn't need to, boom, it's gone. And that was like,
Yeah.
you let it go. You don't want to do that. You want to hold on to those key parts. And then when it's not a key part, it's not a big deal about doing a variety of things, but we have those main focused points we don't want to let go of.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it does take discipline, right? I guess for some people that doesn't necessarily sound as sexy to be as disciplined and as like analytical almost about your day. But I have just found that you can just get so much more out of your hours if you're intentional about it. And then you actually end up working less than someone who goes in completely blind. Um, so yeah.
Wait, we're gonna rewrite the framework. Charlotte, say that you're disciplined. I got this.
Yep.
No, no, it's okay. I was gonna do a little skit there, but okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I missed it. What do you want me to
Right.
say?
So you're like, I'm disciplined.
I'm disciplined.
Wow, that's such a hot characteristic that is more important than other features. We switched the framework there. Now it's a new thing. We've altered it. Now that's the cool feature. We've changed the framework. We did it.
I
Teamwork.
mean, for online, it is quite a cool feature, right? All the productivity stuff and yeah, it's a whole
Right.
world.
It's one of the main ones on the internet.
It is.
What are what are some? I usually include this earlier, but what are some key personality traits you identify with, or like Big Five or Myers-Briggs or any of those that it's you take it as you, and it may be useful in what you do.
Well, it's the first one that comes to mind is curious about the topics that I'm interested in. I can be yeah, just very curious about certain things and then go into deep rabbit holes and read a lot about it and listen to podcasts and just look up a lot of information about it. So a very deep curiosity about a lot of topics. Um, Adventurous as well, I'd say. Just had that kind of international experience for the past 10 years. Um, I just feel like I'm kind of giving myself compliments here now
No,
to end the podcast.
descriptions. Descriptions are, I guess, our descriptions a compliment? Yes, because our descriptions that we identify with are the things that we have a strength in. So I guess they are. I never thought about it that way. When we describe ourselves like these are these four features, we pick those because those are we wouldn't usually pick something that we don't really identify with or are not skilled in. So it is sort of a compliment. I never thought about that. That's
Well,
funny.
I guess maybe not necessarily, right? You could
Oh yeah, it could be like despondent, and then that would be
despise.
then that wouldn't right. That's true. But that individual maybe is processing more deeply than some others.
That is true. That is true.
Right. Fair. I feel like it's good to have a sense like awareness, like you talked about. When you don't have the awareness, you have the things, but they don't get anywhere because you don't know you have the things. It's like you have a bunch of tools for your garden. You don't know you have the tools, so you look at your garden and say, I don't know what I'm going to do there. But once you know, oh, okay, these are tools, suddenly you had the same garden. Now you have the tools, boom, ready to go. It was already there. The awareness is like bringing it into your location in a way to use it.
Yeah, definitely.
My last question for you on this one will be what would be a message you would want to send to people through the content you have created in recent time? Is there any larger messages you are trying to get to the general populace?
I'd say, and this is a message as much to myself. Um,
Those are the best ones.
those are the best ones, but to me, it is, and that's what kind of my all my writing revolves around. It is about being curious about your mind and your body because there is so much to learn and it's so deeply fascinating. And once you start learning about your nervous system and kind of the basics of it, I'm not talking about like going deep and hard into the science of it, but once you start learning the basics of how your brain works, you just start seeing how much how much control you really have and how much you can actually do and change in your day-to-day life to feel better, to think better, to look better. And that's all in your control. Just by making small tweaks to your day-to-day habits and kind of your day-to-day activities. And it's just endlessly fascinating. So I would say have that curiosity about how this body works and how this brain works. And you'll be amazed by the things that you can do.
Have curiosity about your internal world. Charlotte,
Yep.
I would like to thank you for having joined on this episode of the discussion on the Armin Show from Belgium, showcasing quite a bit and sharing with us your knowledge.
Thanks, Armin. Thanks for having me. This was fun. Sorry I missed the sketch idea. I think you're gonna
You
have to
didn't
cut that
miss
out.
anything. That's funny. And we are out.